Thank you all for being here. I'm surprised anybody showed up for the arts at a conference like this. I mean, I'm interested in this topic because by most definitions, if creativity lives anywhere at SMU, it should live at the school I'm responsible for, the Meadows School of the Arts. Not that there isn't enormous creativity in business and engineering and in theology and other areas, but it should be the very core of the identity of the Meadows School. And of course, I'm concerned with the world our students will inhabit when they graduate, and if there's anything I can do to ensure they're better prepared to thrive, I want to do those things. Like you, I've read the reports that estimate AI will replace 50 million jobs soon. So what does that look like in the creative sector? Are the robots coming for our jobs? I'd say probably not yet if you're a dancer. Now,
creating music that they would never be able to create themselves.
And probably still a while in the future if you're a jazz musician.
Human can, and that would be music that only machines can do. You can have the pictures of them. Just
Kind of lame, actually, don't you think? But these are really shots across the bow that we'd be foolish to ignore and not to know what's going on at the intersection of art, creativity, artificial intelligence, robotics, and other technology today. Of course, we've seen the complete disruption of the music industry and the disruption of the fine art industry, but those are really disruptions in the business of how a product is delivered. And what I'm really interested in today is exploring how the actual process by which art is created is being disrupted. Of course, those disruptions in process will eventually find their way into the marketplace anyway. So the plan is to dip our toes into several examples from the field of art and from the field of music. Those two areas only just because of time. We don't have that much time together, but all creative fields are going to be affected. And full disclaimer, when I started this project, I was certain that creativity was a uniquely human domain, that no machine, no matter how sophisticated, could replace or approximate human creativity. No algorithms could be devised that would combine sounds and rhythms that even an amateur couldn't distinguish from J.S. Bach. That no neural network could create art that humans believe to be more human than art created by humans. I mean, after all, isn't the machine only capable of what it's been programmed to do by a human? But you know, as you're going to see during the session, I'm not so sure anymore. I mean, it's been exciting, it's been unsettling, it's been astonishing to see just some of the things that are going on. As Dr. Hess said in the first session this morning, though the implications of asking about human creativity are really the same questions as asking what it means to be human. So this guy he builds robots, and he's been creating code to teach them to paint for a while. When he began, they could only do simple tasks like connect dots and paint by number, but his newest robots use deep learning, they use AI, they use generative algorithms and all sorts of creative computation to make a surprising number of artistic decisions. According to him, his robots are now augmenting his creativity. So let's listen in to him talk a little bit. And so, I mean, the key here is that the robot starts with an image that's been selected by the artist, and then continues with the style that has been replicated in code, and then mashes them up to create a new image based on those two things. I mean, how does that fit with your notion of creativity? Is that creativity? Is that art? And I'm going to just dangle that, not discuss it just yet, but be thinking about that for a minute. Now, there's another clip here I wanted to share because in it he brings up the idea of emotion or emotion in art. And it seems relevant, you know, at the keynote that Dr. Hess would single out emotion as a human, maybe the human differentiator, and emotional intelligence, one of the highest values in the world to come. So here we go on with this.
I think when people see a great work of art, one reason they relate to it is because you think, oh, this great artist had the same emotion as me. So how could a robot create that?
Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, a robot won't be able to make emotional artwork until it is emotional. But that doesn't mean that when we look at a piece of artwork, we can't get emotions from it. So, you know, every so often, my robot will paint a picture that looks like a sad person, and that might make me feel sad. The robot was obviously not sad when it made it, but it didn't stop me from having that emotional reaction.
Okay, now there's the image again. And now I want to move to an art critic's response. This is another place on the web, but an art critic's response to that painting, which he knows has been created by a robot.
This is the first image I've seen that doesn't look like a computer made. The robot really likes post-impressionism. That's good taste. Could I mistake it for a real person's hand? Sure. It certainly doesn't make it better.
So what do you think? Is that, would you buy that art? Would you, and hang it on the wall? Does it make a difference that it was created by a robot? And again, I just want to dangle those questions for you to ponder as we go forward. Pretty serious study just this year out of Rutgers University suggests a computer is capable of creating art, original art that looks as human generated as the works on display at Art Basel, which of course were created by humans in that part of the show. I'm going to show you two sets of images. This one, now that's actually 16 different images, and in the study the participants looked at each of them individually, so you got to suspend a little bit of judgment. And this one, this set of images. So I'm asking the question, which of the two sets do you think is generated by computers? One is all computer art, the other is all human art. This one or this one? One more look. I'm not going to tell you right now, but I will in a minute. Are these generated by computer or painted by humans? Are these generated by computer or painted by humans? For the study, deep neural networks were programmed to maximize, no, I'm sorry, I left out something important. The deep neural networks learn to replicate a number of painting styles by having been fed images of more than 80,000 paintings from all historical periods of painting by 1,000 different artists, okay? So the network were then programmed to create new images with the maximum possible deviation from existing styles, not to combine existing images and an existing style, the way Pindar was doing. You see the difference there? And so then the participants in the study were shown these two sets of images and others and asked to guess whether a human or a robot or a computer had created the images. One work, one set, all from Art Basel, the other entirely by computer. Participants believed that 53% of the images created by computers had been created by humans. Conversely, they believe that 41% of the images created by humans were actually created by computer. And it goes further. When the respondents were asked to rate how intentional and visually structured and communicative and inspiring the images were, they rated the computer images higher than the Art Basel set. I mean, do you find that kind of shocking? I mean, so while at the moment AI is not putting artists out of work, the examples are certainly hinting at the artistic potential that lies there. I mean, what does that really mean for artists today? And in the future, and what does it mean for businesses and institutions that utilize art in the service of other activities? So which one do you think it is? How many say these are created by humans? Okay. You're right. You're right. This set is all computer generated, 100% computer generated. Of course, there's stuff going on at Google in the area of computer art. That's a rabbit trail we could go down for a long time because there's always a lot of it. But the main story is that there's a new open software called Deep Dream. Did I go backwards? That provides artists ways to be creative, and I'll put that in quotes at the moment, in new ways. Here's the home page of Google. Here's an image created in Deep Dream, slightly Van Gogh-ish. I mean, it started with a photograph that was manipulated and manipulated and manipulated until it came out into this. Here's one that's even stranger. A lot of the Deep Dream images that get morphed into something that's hallucinogenic or psychedelic looking. I mean, here, everywhere you look, there's a different face or a different part of an animal, and it's very disturbing, I think. And I wanted to show you an example of one that is a real piece of art that sold for $8,000 at auction pretty recently. It's by a British artist named Memo Acton. And I have to use screenshots for this is protected imagery, so you'll see some other stuff from the screen, okay? So Acton started with this image of GCHQ, which is a Google map screenshot of the British spy agency, GCHQ. And then he fed that image into Deep Dream and kept morphing it and morphing it and morphing it until he came up with this. Less the extra detritus that's on the screen because it's a screen capture. But see, if we back up again and you look at sort of the nexus right there, and rotate it 90 degrees, that's the source image by which he created this. And by the way, that's a huge, I mean, the one that actually sold is 8 feet long and 5 or 6 feet tall. So the artist says, and here they are side by side, if that may help you see the connection. Said that because he could sell it for that much money, that's an endorsement of his value as an artist in a world increasingly dominated by technology. That Google made a better paintbrush for him to work with, but that not just any image fed into it, could come up with something that you could sell for $8,000 bucks. Now I'm going to let you judge for yourself on that point, but it does raise a whole new set of questions about who gets credit for the artwork, who gets paid for the artwork. I mean, is it the artist? Is it the computer software? Is it the designer of the software? Or what? And I guess, is the final product really art?
Is it freeware? Or do they have to, does the artist?
Deep Dream is free.
Okay.
It's free. Mm-hmm. So there's a ton of stuff in the art world that we could explore further, but I just wanted to go quickly to an online vendor of fine art. This is Fine Art America, and check out some of their computer-generated art. So there are pages and pages and pages of computer-generated art. Has anybody been here or purchased anything from a site like this? It's pretty cheap. I don't know if you can read it. Like this one is $37. This one is $14. But I would say that artists that want to make a living might consider this potential market. Although, I also have to tell you, when I was preparing this talk and thinking about it, I talked to our chair of art, Ira Greenberg, who is also our chair of creative computation. So this is a guy that's an artist and a coder. And he said something I thought was priceless. He said, there was a time in my life when I wanted to explore artificial stupidity, not intelligence, artificial stupidity, create computational neuroses, and develop algorithms that need to make art. So, here's a larger version of one of those images. That's the $37 one. And here's one called Anxiety that might just be the kind of neuroses that I was talking about there. So that's a good place to jump over into the field of music. Any quick questions before I do that? We'll have Q&A at the end too. Maybe it'll draw it all together. So some examples of computer-generated music. This, by the way, is not new. I mean, here's a recording of the first piece of music that was 100% composed by a computer. 1956 is the year this dates from. I mean, they were probably, those card type of computers. It was the Iliac Suite. It's a string quartet. Of course, this is being played by a live string quartet, but it was composed by a computer. It's a long piece with about 20, 30 minutes with a lot of variety. This is the beginning. It's kind of sprightly and peppy, but as you get into it, it becomes more somber and it becomes lyrical and quite expressive. Now, so I'm going to pause that for a minute and come back to the subject of emotion. For thousands of years, some have posited the idea that music is an expression of human emotion, perhaps the most direct artistic expression of human emotion. That certain melodies or certain chords communicate certain feelings or emotions. That, for example, when we listen to a Beethoven symphony, what we're hearing is an expression of his inner emotional life, you know, his joys and his sorrows and his torments, his angels and his demons, somehow transported, you know, magically across time and space to us when we hear the music. 20th century went a long way towards deconstructing that hypothesis, but I really wonder if we could ever be as moved by a piece of music written by a computer as we are by that of Beethoven. So that's where David Cope comes in. Plenty of us would probably like to think not. But Cope disagrees. I mean, he says the question isn't if computers possess a soul, but if we possess one. And clearly that's a philosophical question for the moment. I'm going to just whistle right past, okay? But he's been experimenting with artificial musical intelligence for several decades, back almost as long as that. And by inputting vast amounts of code, he came to be able to form a musical mind. By inputting the vocabulary and syntax of a composer's work, you know, with thousands and thousands of examples, the software could deconstruct it and then identify signature elements and recombine them in new ways to create computer music that even experts might not be able to distinguish from the original. So he's working with Bach at the beginning, some of the most rule-based music in history, which makes it a logical step here. But he realized that Bach's genius wasn't in his following the rules, but it was in how and when he broke the rules. So then Cope started creating code that would intentionally break the rules by injecting some randomness into the code. So here's an example of a 1990s recording called Bach by Design. The graphics are also generated by the code. Now, you may or disagree or agree that this is artistically creative, but I can tell you from a professional musician's point of view, this is far more than simply copying Bach. I mean, the signature DNA of Bach's music is all there, and yet this is not Bach. This is David Cope's computer code, and not Bach. Only he started getting into other composers. Here's a synthesized example of Vivaldi. I mean, this sounds like Vivaldi. It's not. It's computer generated, but okay, I'm going to cut into there for the sake of time. Not surprisingly, the musical establishment reacted with tremendous alarm when they started hearing music of this quality coming from a computer, and then they reacted with vitriol. Cope found it hard to get any serious musicians to perform his music, though it made the same technical and artistic demands as the real thing. Like the critic above, of the painting, music critics convinced themselves that they heard no humanity in it and no depth of emotion. And he was characterized as a composer without a heart. What do you think? Would you buy a recording of that music? Or would you buy a ticket to sit in a concert hall where some of that music was being played? And again, I'll dangle that out for you because I want to look at a real-time melding of an artist and a machine. I love what this guy is doing. His name is Dan Tepfer. He's a concert pianist who also improvises jazz and also writes code. Okay? And in this project, he's exploring the intersection between algorithms and live improvisation. He's performing on a Yamaha disc clavier, which is an acoustic piano, but that can also be controlled by a computer through a MIDI interface and and an elaborate. Sometimes you've probably seen a disc clavier in a hotel lobby or off playing by itself in an airport. So his code records what he's improvising in real time, and then modifies it in a whole variety of ways and plays it back as he continues to move forward. So you've got this kind of amazing work where the performer and the piano are creating the new work together. Now the code doesn't create the work, the code simply sort of lays down the rules by which the work unfolds. I'm going to let this play for a couple of minutes just to give you a sense. And the code generates visuals too that you'll start to see in the background. The white is what he's playing or represents what he's playing. The green is what the computer is playing. Okay. Okay, I hate to, but I'm gonna cut in there. This improvisation goes on more than an hour, and it goes through all kinds of different sounds and moods and colors and things. So it's really, I really like that stuff. And Dan is going to be on campus in the spring for a multi-day residency, working with our music students in the Division of Music. Again, not surprisingly, Google is doing something in this space. And what I've heard coming out of Magenta, which is the software, is fairly primitive and fairly lame compared to what you've heard already. But that's going to change fast, I'm sure. And what's exciting is all the computational power behind Google and the fact that it's free and it's open. I'm going to play a little bit of a song. This comes from a news clip where you can hear the first song that Magenta created in the background. And again, it's a neural network that fed a whole lot, thousands and thousands of songs, and as it processed them, it began to develop an intelligence that could decide what note follows what note, in a musical composition. So here's just a little bit of it.
Google AI just created a song. Take a listen to a sample of the first song created in part by Google's Project Magenta. Project Magenta comes with the Google Brain team, and yeah, Google's got a brain team dedicated to deep learning and machine intelligence. Magenta has a couple of goals. One is to build a community of researchers, coders, and artists. The other goal is to advance machine intelligence for music and art. Google released a 90-second piano tune made using Project Magenta. The melody was created by a neural network. that network was given 4 notes to start. The drum track was added by a more complicated machine called a human being. Google says.
Okay. We'll stop there. I'm as sure as I can be, especially in areas like film, commercial music, jingle writing, that it's inevitable that working composers will start to use AI of this type, even if for the sake of the speed with which they can create new work. Now, some companies, Juke in the UK, for example, have already figured out how to monetize AI-generated music. It's expensive to create or license original music and use it in any kind of a commercial application. But Juke sells tracks for 99 cents with, you know, they're fully computer generated, they're unique, and they're fully licensed to do anything you want with them. You get to choose, I'll show you a couple of screenshots. Across the top, you choose the length of the music that you want. And then you choose the genre, and there's a whole bunch more than these. I mean, you may not be able to read it, but it says electro, folk, synth pop, cinematic, and then the mood. And you can pick the climax point. These are all decisions that anybody who knows nothing at all about music can make. So I decided to try it out and show you a couple. We could do this live, but it just takes about 3 or 4 minutes for it to do the computing. So I put in one where it was, I think it was ambient and spacey. This was a 25-second example. Now it's going to come to. And just to see what it would do if I chose cinematic and dramatic, I made those choices, and now we have, sounds like the Bourne Supremacy or something, you know. But, So it's not, it's not the first program to write original music, but the business model may be right for the moment with all the millions of people in businesses, wanting a musical track for a YouTube video or whatever, but couldn't afford to commission or license original music. This is one of the most lucrative sectors in the music industry. And I predict it's where the first real casualties of AI will land for composers who work in this space. I'm betting that commercial composers who write jingles and soundtracks who don't adopt AI are likely to be out of a job pretty fast. Now let's pivot for a moment to a non-commercial application. I think this may be the next generation David Cope. It's a woman named Danya Quick at the Yale School of Music. She was here for a year on a visiting professorship, and she's built a machine learning system called Kulita that learns the rules of harmony and pitch architecture for any music that you feed into it. You can do, in other words, it's a neural network, deep learning, and it has no limit, but it builds a library of genres and styles that you can then recapture any way you want, but in a way that no one's ever heard before. So Kulita could do something in seconds that would take a human, days or weeks to do. She doesn't envision this as something that replaces composers, but something that augments their creativity and accelerates the speed.
Is a program for automated and algorithmic composition. And one of the interesting things about Kulita is that you can either use Kulita as a standalone music generating program, or you can use Kulita more like a library and take the pieces of Kulita that you're interested in and sort of make them your own. The learning algorithm uses analyzed musical data. So you can think of this as taking a musical score and performing basic harmonic analysis on it. So Kalita does need a little bit of help to get going with the learning, but once she has an analyzed score, she then looks for high-level patterns in it. So this is where the first generative step comes from.
And this goes on for a while, but I think you kind of get the point on that. Her goal is to combine Mozart and Metallica into a grand rock opera. So the final domain I want to touch on just briefly is immersive technology. In this case, just a little bit of augmented reality, because I suspect at least a big part of the commercial future of creativity and artistic experience lies here. Fortunes are going to be made here. Magic Leap is a developer. I don't know, does anybody know anything about them here? One of our creative computation alums works for them, but they've developed augmented reality goggles that don't occlude all of your vision. Okay, it's not like VR where you completely occlude your natural vision. These you can actually see through, and the natural field of vision then is commingled with an artificial field of vision. So they say it creates believable experience. Sigur Rós is an Icelandic sort of avant-garde rock band. I don't know if you know them. So they've been working together with Magic Leap on this project called Tonandi, which brings these things together. In Tonandi, the music itself is generating 3D images of various types, and then with the goggles, the listener can move in the space, and how they move and how they gesture will not only shape the augmented reality, but come back and shape the sound as well. I mean, this is really amazing stuff. And we're just kind of at the beginning. This is only a couple of weeks old, what we're seeing here.
Yeah, so basically that came out of this meeting, this intent.
And this is a commercial video, by the way, that because they're trying to sell the goggles, but I've clipped a few things out of it.
Manipulate sound in real time in front of you, kind of. So the sound is kind of a living thing, or creature or being, we can stretch it or bend it or press it down or just do whatever you want with the sound. And the sound is kind of like a cool idea.
And a little deeper into the video, I just want to show you a little bit more of this.
Drop the control and allow someone to actually be able to reach out and touch the music and touch the sound. And that, I think, was kind of a big turning point for us and for the project.
So that first prototype we did, which is the Lisa Jude figure, just the waveform, we then said, okay, well, what if you can touch that?
So you're seeing the audio in this 3D pattern, and as you reach out to it, it begins to attract towards your finger. And as it's doing that,
See, that's the real finger you could see going in there, you know, through the.
That sound and seeing it at the same time.
The reality that you are putting your bare hand into thin air and manipulating an object in space, not only visually but the audio, it's completely mind-blowing.
Taking elements of their sound and elements of who they are, not just as a band, but as people.
I believe this experience is quite intuitive. On the simplest level, I would say that's what makes this experience very seamless.
I mean, this really blows my mind. I don't know when you start to think of the possibilities here, because now the audience, rather than being, you know, a passive receptacle or even an educated, active listener, becomes an engaged participant, you know, in the immersive experience. I imagine it's something that's going to start with recorded music that would be accessible, you know, at home or anywhere you can connect, but eventually could even apply to live performances, you know, where the audience collectively participates in this kind of a thing. So that, at least according to what I'm seeing these days, is the new frontier. And it's an amazing time.